Hello everyone and welcome back to yet another episode of The Gloving Paradigm, where I am your host, Peter aka LPD Dubuque, the cringiest glover on YouTube.
Oh, I made myself sad.
I don't know why I should be proud of that, but I'm embracing it anyways.
This guy.
So, what is it this week that I'm going to be covering? Well, we are going to be covering something that has a lot of things to say, really. Because this is, without going into so much detail, this to me is probably one of the most controversial styles within gloving because, how to put this? Do you guys remember from the third Pirates of the Caribbean what Gibbs says when they talk about the Green Flash?
Some go their whole lives without ever seeing it. Some claim to have seen it who ain't.
Yeah, that's kind of how it feels when it comes to this particular style on gloving. And what is it that I'm going to be covering in this particular episode, being one of my most ambitious videos that I'm going to be making to date, is morphing.
What? What the fuck?
Yes, I'm going to be covering morphing. Reason why I need to cover this is because, frankly, between all the other styles like impacting, conjuring, phasing, platforming, clocking, all that stuff, this is a particular style that I get asked about a lot. And the reason why I feel like this particular style is so controversial is because so many people have different interpretations of it. I'm going to be explaining my interpretations of this particular style because why not?
Sure, Jan.
Without further ado, let's get right into things. Okay, so full disclosure here. Yes, all the information that I'm going to be talking about and all the information that I gathered together to come up with my own interpretation of this style to help people understand it comes from Jess's book, the original post that Peter Dalton made on Facebook, including the comment section that was there, and the Morphing Lounge, which, yes, it is a Facebook group for people to learn morphing.
Oh, cool. I mean, cool.
One of my other biggest gripes about this particular style is when people ask other people about, hey, how can I learn about morphing? And their response is watch this person, this person, this person, this person, and figure it out. Okay, what are they supposed to be looking for in order to figure it out? If you're not telling them what they need to look for, then what are they doing? They're just watching videos. You're not giving them any sense of direction of what they need to be looking for in order to understand this particular style. So, how do we do that? Well, the first thing that we need to cover here the most is the definition of what is morphing. So morphing is an abstract gloving style that aims to disrupt the viewer's field of vision, using abstract animations to create a series of seemingly endless transitions within the box theory complex.
What the hell is that?
Yes, I understand that most people don't even know what the box theory thing is. If you haven't checked out my impacting episode yet, please go check it out. I do cover it there. But to summarize it here, and I will have an episode going into great depth about this particular theory, the box theory is a framing method in which the performer works within that allows the viewer to watch without moving their head and to the greatest extent, their eyes. This creates a state of visual distortion and manipulation, resulting in placing the viewer in a hypnotic trance-like state of mind. That is the best way I'm going to describe it to you guys.
Wow! That was amazing!
So morphing, like impacting, has the same goal of distorting and overwhelming the viewer's field of vision. They both use box theories as a way to accomplish this goal, but operate differently in their tactics. So one of the major things I will definitely say that I don't hear get talked a lot about is the comparisons between impacting and morphing. Well, they have the same goal, is to disrupt and disorient your viewer, right? But the different tactics that they go with is what makes them different. Clearly, why else would I be saying this? So here's the thing about impacting. Impacting uses its disruption and overwhelming senses tactics with two lights as its focal point. When it comes to morphing, morphing goes into a more abstract thought process in terms of animations rather than surprise and overwhelming. Yes, with the seamless transitions and the things that morphing is able to do, yes, it still overwhelms the viewer's senses with the visual field. However, it is not using the brightness and the contrast between two colors and two lights as the focal points. Rather, it is just the movements itself that become the main focal point of morphing. So, with that being said, let's first go into the different variants before we actually go into the characteristics. Because yes, like most styles, there are different variants within morphing. Okay, and like most styles, you usually have maybe one or two things that it's based off of. In this case of morphing, there are two particular variant styles that is the foundation of morphing that all the other styles kind of operate off of. Do they have to operate off these things? No, but typically what you will tend to notice as you study morphing is that these are the two base styles that they tend to operate off of.
Okay.
First one being Megazord morphing, a style method in which the performer separates their hands and then recombine them to make new shapes and structures, making new hand positions. Then you have Transformers morphing, which is a style method in which constant connection of the hands to create an ever-shifting shape and constant flux. These are your two main ones that people are going to talk about, and a lot of the times you're probably going to hear me refer to these two forms of morphing as we go out throughout this episode. But the other styles that you'll find, or other variants that you're going to find within morphing, is the creature morphing, which is a style that animates its formations to take on a lifelike effect built off of both Megazord and Transformers morphing. Of course, you also have digit/touch morphing, which is just a style that utilizes tech-based concepts as the interchangeable parts of the performance. And of course, we also have morph pacting or impact morphing, depending on how you want to look at it. But it is a combo style using best of both styles to maximize on the disruptive field of vision goal. Now, I will certainly say that there are other styles that, well, I'm sure that there's somebody who's going to make in the comment section, I'm a conjurer and I like to do morphing too, and I combine the two as well. Yeah, I'm sure that there is morphing out there, or morphing, conjure morphing. However you want to put it together, I don't really care at this point. But here's another thing I want to disclaim as well. It is really difficult to find some of these examples because a lot of these examples came from the early days of gloving, where glovers didn't really think this probably would have gotten as far or as big as it has. Therefore, that kind of information is kind of lost. Or they just never posted it, and they just have it in the abyss of their computer. So, I'm sure that there is examples out there. I'm sure that there is evidence and video footage to help us with that. However, it's probably not on the internet. The other thing I want to disclaim as well is that in recent years, there's been videos that have been put up and taken down. And particularly, I know a lot of people, the impacting community knows what I'm talking about. That there were videos that were available to them that became no longer available to them for various reasons of the original poster, just taking them down, privating them, or unlisting them, or just archiving them. For whatever reason. I really don't care why these people take them down. However, it is a great shame, in my opinion, that these were taken down because guess what? Now we don't have that information. Now we don't have that kind of thing to help people learn impacting to a great extent. Now, yes, Lust is over there at ugamoves.com. She is the impacting teacher. I get that. However, I'm sure she was very upset when she had all these resources available to her to help people learn impacting be removed from her so she can't use it anymore. That's very upsetting. So, I tried my best to find these videos to help kind of show examples of these styles. But you need to understand, in the early days of gloving, there was a lot more different thought processes and mentalities that people have. If you remember the great magician saying that a magician never reveals their secret, that's the same idea that's been happening. In the early days of gloving, at least. If you guys didn't know, Sharky actually got a lot of backlash when he came out with his tutorials in the early days of gloving because of that. And if you don't believe me, you can go ask him yourself. I'm sure he'll tell you some version of that happened. But it's been brought up to me multiple times by various outlets that yeah, he got some backlash for doing that. But again, we're talking about 2009 to 2011. Yeah, the very early days of gloving. The whole idea of don't copy my moves. Yet when you show somebody a combo to teach them the concept, yet you tell them not to copy the move that you're teaching them so they can expand on it, change it, and make it their own. Do you see the problems that started happening?
What? That is crazy.
Yeah. Sorry if I don't have that kind of footage for you guys, but I will at least work on trying to provide the best of what I can find. So, without further ado, let's just go ahead and start talking about the characteristics of morphing.
Yes!
Before we start going into the characteristics, I do want to point out that through my research between Jess's book, the original post in the Morphing Lounge, and every other form of information that you can find on morphing, these are particular aspects that I do not see very often talked about that I took note of, and this is what I've been saying to people to help them understand morphing to some extent or another that has proven rather positive results in my opinion when I have tried to explain and have shown and demonstrated morphing to people. So, first things first I want to talk about is what I like to call the amoeba construct, which basically is an application in which the center field of vision is the nucleus construct, while the peripheral vision is more of the pseudopods of an amoeba. Most of the show either occurs within the nucleus with movements that protrude out, giving the shifting shape of the performance. One of the major things I will definitely say about the amoeba construct is that I find it to be morphing's way of framing things within itself as opposed to what impacting uses when it comes to box theory. A key point of the amoeba construct as well that most people need to keep in mind is that when it comes to certain rotational movements that morphers tend to do to set themselves up in new hand positions and new places within the field of vision, tends to have an isolation point be in the center, whether it's in the center of both of their hands where there's like a center connection point, or they generally in the center field of vision is where they have certain rotation tends to happen. These are things that I feel like a lot of people also miss out on that is very important to keep in mind. Another major trait that I feel like a lot of people need to learn and understand is what I will call the pendulum effect. Now, the pendulum effect is a multifaceted effect that happens throughout a morphing show, whether it's be within the individual movements that are happening in terms of speed, or on a macro level in terms of the field of space. What I've always stated to people when it comes to pendulum effect is that it's an application in which moving through the field of vision with your movements from one side to the other throughout your show. This applies to a micro and macro level scale, both within your own movements and where it is in the space provided. So one major thing I want to point out when it comes to this particular pendulum effect is yes, there is the obvious application where it comes from one side to the other, or having one set of move happening on one side of the field and then happening again or in similar fashion on the other side, providing a sense of symmetry that is supposed to happen throughout most motion shows. But the other thing that doesn't get pointed out to a lot of people is which the pendulum effect takes place on the speed and pacing that people have within their morphing shows. So, what you tend to see when it comes to a pendulum effect is that you'll see, just like as a pendulum, it will swing really fast and then it will gradually slow to a brief stop just to swing back and pick up in speed again. You will also notice with a lot of morphing shows is that a lot of morphers will have this similar effect in terms of their speed control, as in they start to slow down to a certain point and then start speeding right back up again to the original pace that they had. This is a major component that a lot of people tend to not understand or really pick up on when it comes to morphing shows that I feel most people do not point out. And I'm hoping with my examples I have shown on screen and point things out to you guys that it would make a little bit more sense. Another thing that I will point out is one of the bigger traits and more commonly talked about traits within morphing, and that is the connection and pacing, which is the mentality in which techniques are used suit a specific pace that follows a tempo over specific notes highlighted within a song. The speed does fluctuate based on the segments of the song, whether it's a verse, a bridge, a drop, a build-up, whatever. The connection between concepts are to be blended and seamless, making it look as you're not one or two concepts, but a collection of concepts at once in a perfect harmonic fashion. And one of the major points in characteristics that help brings this all together is the animation and symmetry that morphing has. It is a technique delivery that is done by maximizing on the symmetry of the movements. Asymmetrical formations are used in conjunction to the pendulum effect to give an animated effect of the amoeba moving through space. And one of the other major things that I will say as well is when it comes to, again, the pendulum effect of having a bunch of sets move on one side to happen again on the other side allows that level of symmetry. So it's not necessarily you have to stay symmetrical throughout your entire show, but to give a level of symmetry of where you embody space provided between yourself and the viewer. So without these particular characteristics that I have laid out for you guys, without these being put in place, it's just gloving. It's not anything in particular. There's no particular style that is embodying morphing. So without these being embodied throughout your show, to the untrained person, it's just regular gloving. But then again, a lot of people have told me that just originally started watching people who were claimed as morphers, just asked me and told me, these lists look like people are just gloving. I don't really see the thing that makes them morphing. And that's why I decided to make this episode, because that was the issue that I saw a lot of people running into, is that they didn't know what to look for. So now that we know these particular characteristics, we're going to go over what I would originally call mechanics of the archetype, but the thing is, when it comes to morphing as a style, it doesn't really have what I want to call mechanics per se, because basically anything can be done in morphing. Therefore, what I would like to call these particular characteristic or details are more like tropes within the style, because these are usually what helps pull off a lot of the aesthetic look and choices that people go with when it comes to their particular morphing style. As it was stated in the book and the post as well, that you're not going to see the exact same type of morpher between all the morphers. They all have their own particular take within the style. And you will see that even with the current morphers to date, that they have their own personal take on how to approach this style. And that's probably one of the biggest things that most people are going to learn about this style, is that it's that unique, is that you can interpret it in a way that you can still have these aesthetic choices that are commonalities between everybody, but you're still very unique because it's your take on the commonalities that are between everybody. You know, that's one of the things that makes morphing such a difficult style for people to really get their grasp on, is because they feel like if you do one or two things that everybody does, then you should be doing it too. Similar to like what people say about impacting. However, that is not the case here. So I hope that clears a lot of things up in your mind.
3 days later.
Without further ado, we're going to go over the morphing tropes, as I will refer to them. It needs to be remarked that yes, like I stated previously, that these are the most common things that you're going to see amongst all morphers. However, like I stated before, is the application and the delivery of the techniques provided from each individual person who is claimed to be a morpher or is renowned as a morpher. They have all of these, but again, it's their application that makes them different. So, without further ado, you have the following tropes that most people tend to see. You have tracing, waves, threading, pokes, pass-throughs, hinges, pinches, wrist rolls, and pivots. These are the most common things you're going to see that allows you to pull off your aesthetic choices and allow for what people are looking for when it comes to a morphing show. However, anyone can do any of these things and still not look like a morphing show if you're not embodying the 4 previous characteristics that I stated earlier in the episode. Without those characteristics, you are not being a morpher. And that is one of the major things that people are going to find out when it comes to this particular style, is that yeah, you're going to learn how to do pinches, how to do pokes and pass-throughs and waves and threadings and tracings and all that stuff. But if you do not embody the amoeba construct, the pendulum effect, your connections and pacing, along with any forms of animation and symmetry, it does not pull off that aesthetic choice that is known as morphing. See, this is where a lot of people are starting to realize what it is that goes on when it comes to morphing. One major thing I will certainly say is that, yes, these are typical tropes that you'll see in a lot of commonalities. You see a lot between different morphers. However, the way I look at these particular concepts or mechanics or tropes or whatever word you want to use here, the way I've been looking at it is that these are more of the glue that brings it all together, that really helps bring a morphing show together. It can be the prominent staple moves that you are doing within your show. However, with a lot more new eyes on this style, there have been new approaches to that. But what is true is that, one, that they keep all the characteristics that I mentioned before. But two, they also use these particular movesets to help bring it all together. This is what I want to call as the glue. So it's really hard for me to sit here and just say that these are the only things that you need to do to become a morpher, because these are what morphers use to essentially bring everything together and get that constant stream. You know, that's where when you read in Jess's book or you read in the original post is that morphing is a more full body style that is greater than the sum of its parts. You know, to get those seamless transitions that your traces need waves, which needs pinches, which needs pass-throughs, which needs pokes, which blah 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 blah.
All right!
Again, you'll see that in the book and you'll see that in the original post. And that's one of the greatest things that people don't understand when it comes to morphing itself, is that morphing doesn't necessarily follow the same traditional, conventional way of doing things. You know, if to somebody who's a tutter who really likes using the grid, you're using the grid as your mechanics of moving about the space. As in, morphing doesn't really want to follow that. It wants to move about the space however it wants to accomplish the goal it needs. That's why I don't necessarily say that morphing doesn't use the grid per se. What I am saying is that it's not as prevalent or a priority within morphing's repertoire, as I would say, to use the grid. Yes, morphers can use the grid. I'm not saying that you can't if you want to morph. I'm just saying that it's not a typical construct that morphing will use to accomplish its goal. You know, again, that's why I think when you look at the grid as a framing device, it doesn't really apply to morphing, because morphing wants to use the box theory as its framing device. Now, everyone's going to tell you that you can't stay in the box forever. As much as you would like to try, eventually something will happen, or you do something that gets you outside of the box. And that's a key component that I definitely want to say. If you've watched any of the footage that I've shown, you'll see a couple morphers actually go off frame for a bit to come back down. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. That's kind of like a rest within a song. You know, you get that little pause of silence. That coming off frame or coming out of the viewer's view and field of vision is kind of like a rest within a song. So do keep that in mind when it comes to your approach to morphing. And it's just extremely important to understand. Now, yes, I will certainly say this is something that will come to you in time. This isn't something that you can just do and immediately get it and then all of a sudden you're there, you mastered it. No, this is something that takes a lot more thought. Kind of. I would certainly say that there's a very different mental approach to morphing than opposed to like storytelling, grid work, things of that nature, right?
Yes, definitely!
Okay, so covering all of that, showing you guys the normal tropes, that like the connective tissue that brings morphing together with its characteristics, all that stuff. Now we're going to finally cover the technique.
Well, we're waiting.
As I have stated many times before within this episode, morphing is a style that requires understanding on multiple levels. It is not as simple as doing something like tutting or just digiting and just saying, yes, this is morphing because I'm doing these things. Morphing is a style that can use any concept because it's the application of the concepts that matter. The connection must flow together. The pace must ebb like a pendulum. The amoeba must be constructed in some form or another. And above all, it must be seamless in transition. The goal is to disrupt, distort, and disorient your viewer, and putting them in a trance-like state using these particular forms of tactics. Morphing is an overall fusion-style archetype that can take any concept, break it down to its bare parts and integrate them into their show without compromising the overall connection and flow, keeping true to the morphing ethos. Morphing is something that takes critical studying to recognize the traits of it. A very open approach to your concept using the mentality of 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. Maintaining the pace of tempo as being another key point that a lot of people tend to miss out on. However, I will state when it comes to musicality, as long as you're maintaining that pace as your original speed that you ebb and flow back to, you have no issue there. Having the knowledge of understanding how to break down any concept down to its bare parts and literally putting it into your show in an integration format that doesn't break the overall aesthetic of morphing is the crux of the entire technique that goes into morphing. Because, like I have stated many times within this episode, or just a few times I should say, morphing is a style that is greater than the sum of its parts. Therefore, this is what makes morphing so adaptable and unique within itself, is because literally any other archetype can be integrated into morphing in some fashion, and it's because morphing's entire idea is about how you apply your knowledge to these techniques and these concepts rather than just performing the ethos of those concepts. That's what makes morphing such a difficult style to understand as well, is because it feels like to a lot of people you're going against the conventional method of understanding the concepts to begin with, when that's not necessarily the case at all. In embodying each aesthetics that I have stated out before with the amoeba construct, the pendulum effect, the connection of flow, the animation and symmetry, the seamless transitions, the tropes that bring it all together, and understanding how to break down concepts to your viewer is what is going to sell morphing to your viewer. So how does one go about accomplishing these goals that most people are looking for? Well, understanding how to loop things around in that intentional repetition is another key factor that you need to take into account. It can be something as small as just like 1 or 2 steps that are being repeated over and over again, or it can be something as big as 16 steps that goes into a big loop that goes about the entire space. All that really matters is that you don't keep repeating and moving forward. You have to give a sense of going backwards as well. Hence why you have what is known as the pendulum effect, being that ebb and flow feel. Another huge mentality that a lot of people will learn is that rewinding of the concepts is another huge key point and technique that a lot of people pull off when it comes to that 2 steps forward, 3 steps back mentality. Not only that, it allows you to show that you know both ways of going forward and going backwards, and showing that you can change the concepts by going backwards in a sense that most people probably never ever think of trying out. So one of the main things that people are going to quickly realize is that a lot of the big key points about morphing, it's within its subtle nuances that have going on for it. So one of the major techniques that I always talk to people about when it comes to morphing is the utilization of the wrists. This particular part right here is literally what most people so much overlook when they come to learning about morphing, is because there's not really many concepts that I can think out there that really focus on wrist being a point. You know, that's why when you see them do a lot of things, you see them going around their wrists, because that's what allows them to pull off so many things that you see going on with morphing, right? Another key major point that a lot of people tend to be deceived by, at least in my opinion, I feel like a lot of people get deceived by, is that in order to be morphing, that you have to have your hands connected at all times in order to be morphing. To me, I feel like it's a big deception, because if that's the case, then why does Megazord morphing exist? If the concept of Megazord morphing is to separate your hands and bring them back together to make new shapes and structures, then how is somebody able to do Megazord morphing if they're not allowed to break their hands apart? That's one major thing. So definitely wanted to stress that there are techniques out there when it comes to Megazord morphing that is the loophole to the whole mentality that people keep telling people, that you have to have your hands connected at all times in order for you to be morphing. Yes, connections like that is crucial to a variant of morphing known as Transformers morphing, which is, yes, a constant connection with your hands. However, As it's been stated in the book and in the post, Masters of Morphing will be able to do both sets of concepts or both styles at once. One thing I feel like a lot of people will sit there and ask me about when it comes to morphing is like, well, there's a lot of liquid-based concepts and whip-based concepts and those dynamic movesets that are out there. I have to separate my hands to do so. Not necessarily true. If you actually watch carefully to the early iterations of morphing, such as Musk and the like, their hands are still in a almost constant state of touching each other, or that constant connection that you see within morphing. But here's again another key point that people do not tend to easily see. If you watch his shows very carefully, you'll notice that he tends to stay connected at the wrists. This is another trick that people will start to learn that they can get away with. As long as you use that wrist point to pull off the moves that you're doing, you're still connecting. You're still connected by the hands. Just because it's the wrist doesn't mean you're no longer morphing because you're touching at the wrist now. You're still within that close proximity. The other major technique that I want to discuss about when it comes to like Megazord morphing is the synchronized movements, or the exact image being replicated twice. So a very good example of like the pass-throughs, like again, we're going to use Musk as the example where he's literally doing this. It's two of the same shapes doing the same thing. That's another key component that people need to understand when it comes to Megazord morphing. Typically, not always, but typically, the shapes are the same and they move in the same space. If you guys recall my signature move of being like this and going about like so, this to me is a form of Megazord morphing because one, I'm still using the same shapes on both hands. Not only that, I am moving them in sequence with each other in a synchronized fashion. That's another major key component that I don't feel like a lot of people point out when it comes to that style of morphing, because it was the early days of morphing, so that was a very early rudimentary concept, I guess. But as time went on, it kind of fell out of favor for a bit. However, I do want to stress that that is a thing. So with all of that put together, with understanding the subtle nuances of keeping your hands connected, utilizing your wrist as a point to move about that gives you new hand positions in new areas, not only that, of learning how to just sit there and loop your moves together, which allows that kind of concept to be a thing as well. Again, like many other people have stated before, there are just so many layers of complexes and levels that you need to understand when it comes to morphing, that when you bring it all together, all of it has to be there at once. And that's the thing that throws a lot of people off. So I'm sure the next question a lot of you are probably asking yourselves, well, who are the Masters of Morphing? Who is it that I'm supposed to be watching in order for me to understand morphing in its totality by visual examples? Well, except for watching this episode anyways, but pretty much the people you need to follow or to be watching and studying from when it comes to this particular archetype of gloving starts by the following: Tofu, Maps, Musk, Mumbles, Rhapsode, Beast Boy, Monkey, Megatron, Trips, Clockwork, Slick, Yogi, Wildcard, R-Dub, Youngblood, Crush, and Defuck. These are the people that are most noted for as being morphers within the community, and I'm sure there are many others out there that are known as morphers. I can certainly say that I know Lust knows how to morph. I've seen her show in the Morphing Lounge. It is a good one. If there is anyone out there asking the question, is there a team dedicated to this particular archetype of gloving? Yes. Yes, there is. And it's known as Mighty Morphers. And if you want to know more information about that particular team, I would suggest reading Jess's book. And no, Jess did not pay me to say that. I am saying this out of the goodness of my kind heart.
That was cute. I liked that. I liked that a lot.
Yeah, because people care about that, right? Anyways, that is it. That is the morphing episode. This monolith of an episode that took me 2.5 days nearly 3 days of recording and editing and compiling together. Not only that, it took me a good month since, haven't said it before, but Worldwide Glover is having a concept of the month, and the first one that they had was, you guessed it, morphing.
Yes! That's awesome!
So, if it wasn't for the people who were interested in this archetype, not only asking me these questions and asking me to come help them learn it, but this episode wouldn't exist without their motivation to help me do so. So, you know who you are, particularly 30K, since you're the one who is spearheading this idea and trying to understand this. What some people think is an archaic archetype within gloving, which is not. It is a very, very subtle and very well-rounded type of archetype within gloving.
I made this for you!
I certainly hope you guys enjoy what I had to say. I certainly hope to God that you guys were able to learn how morphing is, because I will certainly tell you that many people will say that the only way to be recognized as a morpher are the people who will recognize you who came before you. But here's the thing I will also have to say. To be considered truly a master of morphing, not only do you have to be able to comprehend and break down and essentially master the techniques needed to do morphing, but to impart that knowledge and to teach somebody who will be able to teach other people makes you a true master. Now, am I saying that I am a true master of morphing? Heavens no! Because, well, first of all, I have to be recognized as a morpher as it is. Even though there have been people in WWG who says that I'm very, very steeped within the morphing style. Again, that's not me saying that, that's what other people have told me. To my face. Yeah.
One eternity later.
So, if there's any morphers out there who think that I missed out on anything, please let me know. Maybe come up with a video yourself. Now, I'm not saying that you should come out to the extent that I did, but it'd certainly help if you did. Just saying.
No, I don't really feel like it.
Maybe call me? I don't know. Just saying.
Nope. Stop talking. Go to jail.
But yep, that is pretty much all for my episode. To close everything off, thank you to everybody who has shown me support thus far. Thank you to everybody who has encouraged me to make this episode, because they were so ready to learn this and were so willing to take my advice and follow the examples I was able to show them. However, if you're somebody who wants to help me further the production of things of this nature and actually be able to get this kind of material out there, you have the wonderful opportunity to support me at Ko-Fi. Yes, I have a Ko-Fi account. It is set up for one-time donations. So if you feel like you want to help me out just a little bit, you have this opportunity to just do a one-time donation. Please donate to my Ko-Fi so I may continue to listen to lo-fi. But yep, that's pretty much all for my episode once again. Thank you for watching / listening. I certainly hope you guys enjoyed yourself. Please let me know on any of my social media what you want to talk about, what other archetypes you want me to cover, all that stuff. Just drop it in my inbox. I will read it and I will get to work on it. But other than that, I absolutely love you guys. But I am your host, Peter, aka LPT Dubuque, and I'll see you guys all next week.